So I was 22 when my mom died, and she was just 49. And when she died, I felt like a piece of my heart had been ripped out of me. Have you ever cried so hard that you couldn't breathe? I didn't know I was capable of that kind of depth of sadness. And then life moves on as it does for the living. And fast forward more than 20 years, I had some friends suggest that I explore working with psychedelics. And I didn't do that kind of thing. I was a business owner, as a father, as a husband, but something inside of me said yes. And that decision ended up sparking a deeper curiosity, one that I couldn't ignore. And I knew I needed to learn more, and I went back to school to study psychedelic medicine, and I started traveling, working with respected practitioners, people like shaman and taitas and MDs and PhDs. And what I learned on this journey is that having a meaningful experience with a psychedelic was not uncommon. In fact, they were catalysts for meaningful experiences. They are not cures by themselves. So Johns Hopkins University took a group of volunteers and gave them psilocybin. And psilocybin is the active ingredient in magic mushroom. 77.8% of them said it was one of the top 5 most meaningful experiences of their lives. It's remarkable. So now I get to spend time working with medical leaders and spiritual leaders, all working with psychedelics for healing, for personal growth, for expanding consciousness. So tonight, we're going to discuss a couple different psychedelics, and we're going to talk about some of the groups that are being studied with them. But before we go further, while I have a master's in psychology and neuroscience of mental health, and I write books on this topic, I'm not a medical doctor. So nothing I say should be construed as medical advice. Second, I'm not advocating for anyone to do anything with psychedelics. This is about giving you information so you can be more informed. And finally, psychedelics aren't for everyone to take. There are people with existing conditions or who are taking various medications or supplements where it can actually be dangerous. So if this is something you are considering, I'm encouraging you to please talk to a healthcare provider first. So it's really important that we have this discussion now, because everywhere we look, we are seeing psychedelics in the news and popular culture on podcasts. In America, we have legal ketamine being offered in all 50 states. We are seeing clinical trials being offered. We saw the entire state of Oregon and soon Colorado having legal access to psychedelics. City after city is decriminalizing psychedelics. And the US government is actually granting religious exemptions for the ceremonial use of psychedelics as a sacrament, as part of a sincere religious belief. And I love that after thousands of years of psychedelics being used in ceremony, even the US government is saying, okay. And what's happening in America is happening all around the world. We are seeing the medicalization, the decriminalization, and the spiritual use of psychedelics. But I get it. Whoa, we have questions. We are just coming out of a prohibition, and we've been told a lot of things that might or not be true. So let's start tonight by acknowledging there are more than 200 academic institutions studying psychedelics. And while they don't know everything that happens in the body when you take a psychedelic, a number of studies have pointed to the fact that a part of our brain, the inner narrator piece, the piece that tells you have to do more, that you're not worthy, it quiets it down. And I know for me, when that happens, when that inner narrator quiets down, it feels like the weight of the world is lifted off my shoulders. Do you ever feel like you're stuck in repetitive thinking patterns or behaviors, like a needle stuck in a record day after day? Okay. That happens to all of us. And as we get older, we are actually pruning our neural pathways. And we literally get a bit stuck in our ways as we get older. It's like our minds went from when we were kids running all over the playground to being running on a treadmill. And no one told us that had happened. Well, the psychedelics pick our minds back up, put us back on the playground, and we can run around this big, beautiful world, and we can remember that we don't have to think about our lives or our relationships or our jobs the way we've been thinking about, and that there are other ways to think about it. And it's this breaking of repetitive thinking patterns that makes psychedelics so interesting to study for so many things, from depression to anxiety to OCD to substance use, eating disorders, even autism. So I want to go back to our propaganda, that this is your brain on drugs. Do you remember this? All right. Well, in reality, this is your brain, and this is your brain on drug. And what's so interesting about these two images is that the image on psilocybin has the exact same neural connections as the image without psilocybin. There's just parts of the brain that are talking to parts of the brain that don't normally communicate. This is a visual representation of the awarenesses and the insights and the awakenings that happen on psychedelics. This is a visual representation of the breaking of repetitive thinking patterns. And I get it. We're talking about drugs. Warning lights are coming on. Aren't they going to hurt us? Aren't they going to lead to addiction? I'm not saying these are safe, but I'm saying to be aware of relative risk. And there are ways to mitigate relative risk, and three of them are source, set, and setting. I could do a whole talk just on source, set, and setting. So just for tonight, let's move forward and talk about, just end with psilocybin. It's a catalyst for making meaning when used responsibly. It's not a cure. Let's switch psychedelics here to MDMA. Now, you might have heard this called Molly or ecstasy. It's a heart opener, an empathogen. It can bring up emotions, can bring up traumas. It can also decrease our shame, our blame, our guilt mechanism so that we can look at these emotions and traumas. So it doesn't magically do the work for us. It enables us to do our own work with those things. So I want to focus in on one group that's really interested in MDMA, and that's veterans. So in America, we have over 17 veterans killing themselves every day. And since 9/11, over 7,000 service members have died in combat. More than 30,000 service members and veterans have taken their own lives in that same time period. And part of why this is happening is the SSRI antidepressants. These are the drugs most often prescribed, don't work on enough people. This is what science is trying to solve for. And one of the ways they're looking to solve for it is giving people with treatment-resistant PTSD, MDMA, and therapy. And in a recent phase 3 clinical trial, they gave these people 3 sessions of MDMA with therapy before and therapy after. And 71.2% emerged no longer qualifying as having a PTSD diagnosis. It's a big number. And it wasn't the medicine working by itself. It was the whole process of the medicine with the therapy. So much so that when the drug company went for regulatory approval, they bundled those things together. And that doesn't happen in drug development. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't enough data for the FDA to approve the medicine yet. But it gives you a sense of what is happening. Another trial, phase 3 trial, is going to happen. And we'll see what happens here in the future. And again, this is how these psychedelics work. They don't do it by themselves. They are catalysts. They're not cures. So I want to talk about one more group, and that's people having end-of-life distress. And for these people, they know psychedelics aren't going to change the outcome. What they're hoping, really hoping, is that psychedelics can change the time they have left, the quality of time they have left on this planet. And I want to ask you, if you were given a terminal diagnosis, would you want to take an antidepressant, give it a month or 2 to see if it worked, and if it didn't, to wean yourself off and then try again? I ask this because New York University gave cancer patients 1 dose of psilocybin, and 83% had a reduction in depression and anxiety and hopelessness. And amazingly, 4.5 years later, of those who are still alive in a follow-up study, 80% said they could still feel the positive effects. These humans said they reported a completely new understanding of life and death, and instead of fear, they were able to confront their mortality with acceptance. And I believe it's the shift in perspective that's brought on by the psychedelic but assigned meaning by the participant that helped alleviate their suffering. Now, in the ceremonial world, it's not uncommon to give the psychedelic not just to the person who is dying, but to their friends and family. And can you imagine the conversations that happen when we do this as a group process, the love that is shared, the forgiveness that can occur? Yeah. And the scientific community is paying attention. There's actually a phase 2 trial happening right now where they're giving cancer patients and someone they love MDMA. Can't wait to see what happens with that. So psychedelics don't rewrite our stories for us. No, they help us rewrite our own stories. They don't help us avoid or numb the pain. They bring it close where we can discover it, understand it, and transform it. In many ways, this process is why with psychedelics, you are the medicine. Psychedelics aren't going to bring back people we've lost, and they're not going to change the past. What they may do is help us assign more meaning to the present, because psychedelics are catalysts, not cures. Thank you.